This video is intended solely for educational and documentary purposes. It contains no ideology or propaganda. Into the depths of the Atlantic, they knew they were heading toward death. June 4, 1944, just 2 days before the Allied invasion of Normandy, somewhere in the vast mid-Atlantic, northwest of Cape Verde. The coordinates strictly classified. That morning, a dense mist hung over the horizon. The ocean was still, cold, steel blue. Nothing disturbed the surface, but beneath it, something rare was moving. The German submarine U-505, one of the most dangerous of its class, already responsible for sinking 8 Allied ships. But what made it invaluable wasn't just its firepower, it was what it carried. An Enigma machine, code books, signal plans, the kind of intelligence that could save thousands of lives if the Allies could only get their hands on it. No German submarine had ever been captured intact. They either dove to their deaths or were scuttled from within on the captain's order. But this time, things didn't go according to plan. The mission that wasn't supposed to happen. Commanding the U-505 was Kapitänleutnant Harold Lange. Young, precise, loyal to the chain of command. His final combat patrol began in March 1944, departing from Lorient, France. And from the outset, it was plagued with failure, fuel leaks, malfunctioning diesel engines, one torpedo tube offline, tension among the crew, months of relentless depth-charge chases, constant pressure, no victories. Lange grew anxious. He knew they were being hunted. The British had begun decoding fragments of German naval transmissions, and somewhere out there, a special American unit was closing in. Task Group 22.3, a hunter-killer task force from the U.S. Navy, led by the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal and 5 destroyer escorts, commanded by Captain Daniel V. Gallery, a man with an obsession. He didn't want to sink a U-boat, he wanted to capture one. No one thought it was possible. It was madness. But Gallery had trained for months, hundreds of hours of drills, boarding under fire, disabling charges, recovering documents. And when a sonar contact lit up the screen, he didn't hesitate. The attack. U-505 tried to flee, but the destroyers were too fast. Depth charges rained down with brutal precision. Explosion, another and another. The submarine's rudder was damaged. Seawater flooded the interior. The U-boat began to spiral out of control. Lange gave the order to surface. Panic took over. The crew scrambled. Lange prepared to destroy the ship. But in the chaos, someone forgot to trigger the self-destruct. The Americans seized the moment. A boarding party rammed the U-boat's side like a sudden storm. At the bow, sailor David Jones. He was the first to enter. Silence, fear, the smell of diesel, the sting of smoke, the floor wet, the water rising. He moved forward, pistol drawn, unsure if the enemy was still aboard. What they found. It became one of the most daring captures in U.S. naval history. They recovered code books, cipher keys, a working Enigma machine, radio schedules, every document, priceless. Then, the impossible. They kept the sub afloat. Right there, in the open Atlantic, they began towing it. The Germans believed U-505 had been destroyed, and the Allies kept it that way. They towed the U-boat to the Bahamas, the crew taken prisoner. But no one could know. A secret worth a war. The intelligence haul was so valuable, the entire incident was classified. Even the U.S. sailors weren't allowed to tell their families where they were. Complete radio silence for over a year. Why? Because those documents would become a weapon in the cryptographic war against Nazi Germany. They could track movements, predict attacks, save convoys. The capture of U-505 marked the first time in 130 years that the U.S. Navy had seized an enemy vessel on the high seas. But this was more than a naval operation. It was about fate, about choices made in seconds, about fear and what it takes to face it. U-505 became a symbol of timing, of courage, of what can happen when chaos leaves just enough room for a miracle. And this was only the beginning, hidden in plain sight. They hid the submarine on an island, Castle Harbor, Bahamas, summer 1944. Moored in silence, surrounded by palm trees and secrecy, the U-505 sat in a dock no journalist would ever see. Above her, the American flag. Inside, the aftermath of chaos, scattered personal effects, flickering signal lamps, half-eaten rations. U-505 had become a ghost of the war, one too dangerous to reveal. The captured crew was kept in complete isolation, no letters, no location, not even a registration with the Red Cross. It was a breach of convention, but it gave the Allies time, a head start, time to decipher, time to understand. The codebreakers begin their work. The Enigma machine was intact. Alongside it, key sheets, navigational charts, handwritten logs, even the captain's journal. It was a trove, one of the most valuable captures in the entire Battle of the Atlantic. U.S. Navy officer Albert Brooks later recalled, "We slept on sacks of documents deep inside the hold. We didn't even dare sneeze near the papers. It was a race against time." They knew the Germans could change their cipher protocols at any moment. Every day lost could mean lives lost. Anatomy of a submarine. But the vessel itself was also a puzzle. U-505 belonged to the Type 19C class, long-range hunter-killers built for distant waters. Commissioned in Hamburg in 1941, 76 meters long, 59 hombres, 22 torpedoes, operational range, 13,000 kilometers. She had the reach to strike off the coast of Africa, even the Caribbean. And she had. In 1943, under Commander Peter Scheck, she sank 3 cargo ships off Venezuela before vanishing again into the blue. U-505 was a machine that breathed. Her steel walls were wet with condensation. The stench of diesel, oil, mold, it soaked into every inch. Cramped quarters, oppressive heat, darkness. Sailors slept between torpedoes. Water was rationed. 1 shave a week was a luxury. Headaches, sleeplessness, the ever-present thump of depth charges above. This was life for weeks, in isolation, surrounded by nothing but groaning metal and the ticking tension of the deep. The human element. After the war, Commander Lang said, "I wanted to destroy the boat, but there was no time. We were already sinking. I was ready to die, but not to kill my own men." He wasn't a fanatic. He was a man crushed by years at sea, by fear, and by a moment that spiraled beyond control. And he wasn't alone. In the summer of 1943, a year before the capture, a mechanic aboard U-505 snapped. He screamed that the voyage was cursed, that the boat would doom them all. He barricaded himself in an engine compartment, threatening to ignite the fuel. They stopped him. But from that day forward, the crew lived with dread in their bones, a ghost in American hands. To the U.S. Navy, U-505 was a phantom. It didn't just shift the balance of the Atlantic campaign, it reshaped the rules of naval warfare. The captured materials became training tools for hundreds of Allied intelligence personnel. Every cipher, every frequency, every scrap of German command structure was studied. Until Germany's surrender in May 1945, U-505 remained a state secret. When the news finally broke, it stunned the public. How could an enemy U-boat have been captured and kept afloat in wartime? The war ends, but her story continues. In 1954, a new conflict was emerging, the Cold War, and a group of Navy veterans made it their mission to preserve U-505. They raised funds, lobbied officials, and saved her from the scrapyard. She was brought to Chicago, to the Museum of Science and Industry, and there she remains. Inside, everything is as it was. Dials, bunks, torpedoes, bulkheads. Steel doors still bear German stenciling, and in the air, the faint scent of time. Every year, hundreds of thousands visit. Many are children of those who fought. They touch the cold metal, step into the narrow passageways, and feel something more than history. They feel presence, tension, purpose, not just a relic. U-505 is the only German U-boat from World War II preserved in the United States. Her legacy is not about triumph, nor is it about defeat. It's about the thin line between action and hesitation, between silence and signal, between survival and loss. One forgotten detonator, one hesitated order, one surviving submarine, and a story that continues to echo, even beneath museum lights. The turning point in a silent war. The capture of U-505 wasn't just a bold maneuver, it marked a turning point in an invisible war, a war of ciphers, silence, and hidden lives. By mid-1944, British ultra and American codebreakers were already intercepting fragments of German naval communications, but they were working with guesswork, incomplete data. And then they had the real thing, a fully operational submarine, an intact Enigma machine, live key sheets, daily code cycles. It was like cracking open a vault no one had touched in years, the intelligence windfall. Immediately after the capture, the contents of U-505 were shipped to Washington under heavy guard, total secrecy. Captain Arthur Wentworth, one of the Navy analysts, would later say, "We found key tables valid for the next 2 weeks. Suddenly, we could read everything moving between the U-boats and command and keel. For the first time, we knew where they were and what they were planning. That knowledge saved convoys. Each decoded message, each order, now under Allied control. Several German submarines were intercepted at sea. A vital convoy headed to Murmansk was diverted in time, thanks to coordinates obtained from U-505's documents. It wasn't just a submarine that had been taken, it was time itself. And in war, time equals lives. The crew, after the silence. The crew of U-505 faced very different fates. Captain Harold Lang spent the rest of the war in a U.S. prisoner of war camp. In 1946, he returned to Germany. He never gave an interview. His name rarely appears in memoirs. Only one letter, later found in his family's archive, held a single haunting line: "I am alive, but part of me is still in that ocean." Some crew members emigrated to Argentina. Others stayed in Germany, working as engineers and mechanics. Decades later, a few of them visited the submarine in Chicago. They stood in silence. They stared at the walls. One whispered, "She survived, better than we did." A secret sealed in silence. The level of secrecy surrounding the capture was without precedent. Even the sailors aboard the USS Guadalcanal were forbidden from writing about it. Their letters home were censored. Most simply wrote, "We are safe. All is well." Captain Gallery signed a personal non-disclosure. He kept it for a full year. No medals, no headlines, not yet. The press said nothing. Radio broadcasts stayed silent. Even classified files were stamped top secret. Only after victory in Europe, in June 1945, did U-505's story reach the front page. The enemy learns the truth. For German U-boat crews, the revelation was devastating. Nazi command had assumed the sub was lost, its codes secure, the crew dead. It wasn't until after the war that they learned the code books had been captured. Suddenly the pattern was clear: failed missions, lost boats, a silent enemy that knew too much. U-505 had become a ghost, one that haunted the Kriegsmarine to the very end. The submarine as memorial. Today, U-505 rests inside a purpose-built hall at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. She was brought indoors, given lights, sound, and a permanent presence. Visitors can walk her length, see the torpedo rooms, the radio station, the crew bunks, but some moments are preserved differently. One section has been reconstructed to simulate the moment of capture. Alarms, yelling, rushing water. It's not just an exhibit, it's the moment when history tilted. Echoes of courage. School children often visit. They ask, "Is it true? Was it really captured?" And the guides answer, "Yes, it wasn't just a battle, it was a miracle, born of discipline, courage, and luck. Because it could have gone the other way. One wrong step, one flip of the detonator switch, one panicked sailor, and U-505 would have been lost forever. But she remained, and now she speaks for them all. The reunion. In 2004, for the 60th anniversary of the capture, the museum held a private gathering. Veterans came, those who stormed the deck, those who handled the codes, and those who had once been the enemy. U.S. Navy Lieutenant James Dudley gave a quiet speech. "We're not here to celebrate victory. We're here to remember what it cost, in darkness, in silence, beneath the sea." The legacy. The story of U-505 is not just a wartime tale. It's a chronicle of how bravery, preparation, and sheer chance can intertwine and change the course of history. It's about the men who acted fast and thought faster. It's about how even a machine of war can become a symbol of hope. And in a world forged by fire and steel, there's still room for miracles.